Hi everyone, I'm Ilona Varo, and I'm joined here today by Stella Dennet, and we're talking about astrology and therapy and the holidays and how all these things come together. I am by all means not an expert in astrology whatsoever, but I'm so curious to find out how it weaves into therapy and psychology and personal development and just how that can really benefit us, especially right now. There's retrograde happening. I do know that much. And so let's just kind of dive into who you are, what you do, and then I've got endless questions.
Yeah, so I guess I'll just say I'm a licensed therapist. I primarily work with people who are interested in understanding their identity and personality and growing and developing in that realm. So it's what Carl Jung said is the individuation process or participating in your individuation process, the journey towards wholeness. So, and this came to me from working with the addiction population for nearly a decade now and seeing how important it is to reintegrate into life and build on that self-discovery process from doing what I think is one of the most difficult things that you can do and heroic things that you can do, which is recovery.
Love that.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, which is a great segue into, the holiday season where I imagine I work mostly with the disordered eating population, so not quite the same, recovery model, but it's a very triggering time being around family, being around societal pressures and expectations for things to look a certain way, a lot of food, a lot of alcohol, a lot of social anxiety. So how does astrology come into play when we're kind of looking at all of these things?
Yeah, I mean, first I'll always say I incorporate archetypal astrology into my work for people that are interested in it. So archetypal astrology is the study of how one's lived experience corresponds to the movement of the planets or the archetypal themes over time. We are not fixed personality traits, as someone might say or say about astrology. We're always developing and changing. So I work under the premise as a therapist that change is possible, that we can change and show up and develop and grow. So if we're thinking about astrology as something that's fixed, it's that those things don't go together. So I'll start there and
Yeah,
say
and I
that. Yeah,
that sounds like the classic antithesis to tabloid astrology, right? Like this is who you are, this is what's happening in your life, but
right.
boom. And I think that's what turns people off most
Mhm.
is it just rubs them the wrong way to be put into just such a confined box and to either feel like that's absolutely them or doesn't represent them whatsoever. I think there's so much misunderstanding around this, which is why I'm glad we're having this conversation. So
Yeah.
how do you like to approach it for people that are really curious? And also like there is a lot of movement happening planetarily, like that's not something we can ignore or deny. There are things happening in the universe, whether
Yes.
or not it's going to bring you luck or, however microscopic you want to make that meaning in your own life, but there is planetary universal shift and there's no way that it can't impact us.
So maybe I'll start by giving an image of what I mean by archetypal themes over time. So the way that I frame identity is if we look at it as a pie chart, identity as a pie chart, and we split it up to many different slices of the pie. There's probably, I don't know, relationships, career, family, etc. So those are all aspects of our identity of like maybe we're a daughter, a sister, or we're, a lawyer, a therapist, or whatever.
Yeah.
But how we show up to those slices of the pie is our personality. Our personality is how we show up to those spaces. So if you've ever seen an astrology chart, it looks kind of like a pie. So all the planets are in the middle of the pie. Nothing's on the outside. So the things that are in the inside of the pie don't change. But right now in the cosmos, there's planets that are moving. There's planetary shifts, like you were saying. And that's what's happening on the outside of the pie. So the inside is fixed, but the outside is not. So as the themes shift on the outside of the pie, they interact with what's on the inside. And when they interact, it causes change or transformation. Does that, if that makes that image make
Totally.
sense?
Totally.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And so is
So,
there a specific shift happening right now on the outside?
well, I think, well, the biggest shift that just happened was Pluto and Aquarius. But that's, more collective, and we'll be talking about collective things for sure. And Pluto and Aquarius coincides with the United States Pluto return, which has been like big talk in astrology on social media of how like Pluto's the planet of like the breakdown before the come up.
Okay.
So it's about transformation and change and unearthing the shadow. So sometimes Pluto will disrupt and cause destruction, but for a good reason, which is so important for us as individuals and as society for things to fall apart so we could see the truth
Hmm.
and adjust and grow. So that's what we're doing as human beings, personally and interpersonally, and what we're doing collectively too. But
Hmm.
I think there's some really positive transits happening right now. If we want to go there, or do we want to go somewhere else?
Sure. Let's do it. Yeah.
Yeah, let's do it. It's so funny because when someone asks me about like the transits or what's happening right now in astrology, I'm always thinking I'm giving like a weather report.
Today.
Yeah, which I think is actually a really important metaphor and relates to kind of what we were saying earlier of how it is used in psychology or archetypally or in therapy, is that it might be raining or sunny outside. Our circumstances, we might not be able to control our circumstances or the movement of the planets or the archetypal themes that are happening at the moment, but we are responsible to how we show up to when it's raining or sunny or hailing or whatever it is.
Right.
So
Right.
our responsibility and how to show up. So the more conscious we are of the themes that are happening in whether it's from an astrological point of view or psychological point of view or both together, the more conscious we are, the more autonomy we have.
The word of the
I
day.
think that is the premise of depth psychology is to make the unconscious conscious.
Hmm.
So
Absolutely.
yeah.
And
So
that's a nice reminder that we have so much control in certain ways of ourselves, our thinking, our actions. Certainly, things are going to trigger us and going to move us maybe in a specific direction, but I think that's where people kind of get in trouble or maybe get turned off by astrology is that they feel like it overrides their own autonomy or their sense of choice or preference or values, and it feels maybe rigid or restrictive.
hmm That's such a good point because we could also think that just as astrology is, or the archetypes or in archetypal psychology, they're unconscious. They're from the collective unconscious. We don't have control over them, nor do we know that they're really happening unless we tune into them. It's the
Mm,
same thing with our personal unconscious. That's why we go to therapy, right? To uncover and discover and discard.
absolutely.
So it's the same vibe
Yeah.
if you think about it. Yeah.
How does an individual kind of go into this process if they're curious, if they want to know about archetypes and what's happening in the subconscious? Obviously, that's a very generalized question for the time we have right now, but how can people kind of start to get curious for themselves?
It's so interesting because I'm writing my dissertation right now on archetypal psychology, astrology, and addiction. And one of the things I ended with is if someone really wants to investigate their lived experience through this perspective, they kind of have to learn what these symbols mean. They kind of have to learn the language.
Hmm.
So I'd like to call it a translation project. We're translating a different language and seeing ourselves from a different perspective through that language. It's just a
Hmm.
different way of seeing.
Hmm.
So that's one way. Another way, of course, is to, see an astrologer or see, a therapist that does astrology or, yeah, and have someone to communicate with it about where you can ask questions and be in the translation project together.
Hmm.
Um, Yeah, I'd say that because, people consume a lot of astrological data on social media, and it's not specific to them.
Hmm.
It's just kind of like a collective understanding of what a transit might mean for a lot of people, like for all Geminis or all Aquariuses or whatever. But it's not, it can't be individualized. So we really have to take those things with a grain of salt.
And what is the best way to learn the language or be able to translate for our own individual needs?
Yeah, I think the best way is, of course, there's so much education on the internet. You can go and look it up and read, but I think the best way is to have like mentorship or see someone that knows the language. And that's how I that's how I started with all of this. Is I was seeing someone that knew the language, and I could peer into my own psyche in a different way that felt very illuminating for me. That's how I got into all of this,
Yeah.
mm, through my own
So
experience.
the generalized stuff, like, I'm sure we all or whoever is interested in this
Yeah.
follows some sort of astrology account on social media. And the generalized things that are put out there, is it useful to try to reflect on that and see how that might be relevant in our own lives? Or is that like how do we use maybe the generalized information that is more available than getting your own chart read or something like that?
I think I think yes, 100%. If you're consuming the data on social media and you're just hearing the themes about what is, like we said earlier, about the identity pie, career, relationship, family, whatever it is, you could still apply it to your life. You could still journal about those things. You could still meditate about those things and ask yourself, what is this information evoking in me? What is it bringing me to think about? And do I need to change the way I'm showing up to these places or this theme that this astrologer is talking about?
Hmm.
We can definitely thicken it for us personally, even if we're looking at stuff on social media too. So you do
Hmm.
make a very good point.
Kind of both and. Like get your own individualized,
Yeah.
personalized perspective, and if you're consuming the kind of mass knowledge, you can reflect on it and see, like you said, what does it evoke?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And it's funny that brings up that there was I did this study while I was in grad school, and I was asking people how they felt about working with specific social media apps,
Mm,
in terms of the ones that are specifically for astrology, just like iPhone apps. And a lot of them said that when they read descriptions of themselves or um, something that was like a future prediction or something, they got anxiety.
mm, interesting.
So I think that's why I'm like, go see someone to talk about your stuff with
Yeah.
personally.
Yeah,
Because if you're someone that's prone to anxiety or have like a, generalized anxiety, then it could be impactful in ways that it could cloud our consciousness rather than illuminate it.
definitely. And
Yeah.
we tend to create or co-create or find whatever we're looking for. So if someone plants the
Mhm.
seed of maybe bad news coming in the future, then of
Yeah.
course that's going to, or be cautious or be wary, of course that's going to bring up anxiety and maybe a spiral of rumination or something. So that's a really good point of
Right.
pay attention to how it's affecting you, and if it's not optimal, then maybe get some support around it or engage with it differently.
I'll tell you this, like someone literally texted me 30 minutes ago and they said, "Hey, I've read online that my Venus is in my third house and that means I'm ugly. Is that true?" I'm like, "No, it's not true. It's not true."
That's so funny.
So I get texts like this all the time that are like, "This said this, like I'm so scared." It's like that's, you know,
So is it misunderstanding, mistranslation? Like what's happening there? They don't know how to interpret the knowledge that's out there? Is it like quite literal, but then you can dig deeper into it?
that I'm so glad you said that because astrology should never be literal. It's because then it's unhelpful.
Okay.
astrology should be, it's more of like a symbolic experience where each
Okay.
symbol has a category of themes. So maybe the person that she was reading on Google or whatever it was said that Venus in the third house meant that someone wasn't good looking or something. Maybe that was one person's experience of that, or what one permutation of that aspect or alignment, as we call it, for one person. Maybe it's true for one person out there, but not true for many, many, many other people that have the same alignment.
Mm. And maybe it's a theme of insecurity or how other people see you or something like that. It's not the literal translation, you're not attractive.
Fair, yes. And then that could be another permutation of it.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. There's different permutations of the same things. What's most important when we're looking at astrology is that we look at the themes of the planets against our lived experience. And our lived experience has to come first.
Okay. I love that.
Not the planets. Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
I love that. Absolutely. And I think from the therapeutic side, I always say, like, you're the expert of your life,
yeah.
regardless of whatever I'm telling you. If it doesn't apply or rubs you the wrong way or you're absolutely not interested, you're the expert of your life, of your lived experience.
Yeah.
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 So what's happening
Yeah.
planetarily? What should we keep an eye out for? It's December. We're
Mhm.
prime holiday season. We're about to be in the New Year resolution season.
Uh-huh.
Like,
Yeah.
what should we keep an eye out for?
So I'll pull up the chart right here for December. And so there's a full moon in Gemini on December 15th. And the full moon asks us to let go of things, always asks us to let go of things that aren't serving us anymore. And it's centering around the ways of communication and thought patterns specifically, because Gemini is ruled by Mercury. Every sign has a ruling planet. And for Gemini, it's Mercury, the planet of communication, all things communication.
I'm a Gemini. Hello.
Okay, there you go. And the full moon is in your sign.
Love
Uh,
it.
my moon is in Gemini.
Oh, I love that.
And it's centering around ways of communication and thought patterns that no longer serve us anymore. So
Okay.
especially, I'd say just to thicken that a little bit, it's not only that, it's about our experience and our one-to-one relationships. And whether that be, a spouse, a family member, or a close friend, or anybody else that you're in a one-to-one close relationships with, to really center in on what are my thought patterns about this relationship in particular, and how are they impacting how I show up to my relationship?
Okay.
um, and to let go of maybe some of those thought patterns, and to also engage in communication with that one-to-one partnership, or engage in communication with someone that is that you trust, to gain some clarity around that relationship, so you know how to like redo or refine something within that relationship. So
Awesome.
that's a big theme, and I kind of like that we're starting out that way in December. And then later on, there's a lovely follow-up that we have a transit regarding our social life with Venus trining Jupiter. And a trine is a very harmonious alignment that brings us a lot of ease. And Venus is the planet of love, sex, and money and relationships. And Jupiter expands everything. It's about luck and faith. So to follow that up, follow the full moon up with something very harmonious like that, there's an energy of letting go of things that no longer serve us in our mental space about our relationships, and then being supported and loved right after. So
Love that.
I love that kind of combination, how it follows up one another.
Nice.
So that's kind of at the beginning. And then towards the end, we've been talking about New Year's resolutions and things like that you kind of brought up. And so we go into the winter solstice, so Capricorn season, on December 21st. And we also have a new moon in Capricorn on December 30th. So there's a lot of Capricorn energy. And I find it so interesting that in Capricorn season, of course, it occurs at every time at the same time in every year. Um, it's a time where everyone sets new intentions, and for how we want to be and how we want to materialize our goals and things like that. So our intentions usually carry Capricorn themes. So as I was saying earlier, every sign is ruled by a specific planet. For Capricorn, it's Saturn, and Saturn is the planet of rules and boundaries and limits, responsibilities and roadblocks, and maturity. Without Saturn, we remain infantile. So the New Year's resolutions always thematically are aligned with the archetype of Saturn or Capricorn because it's during Capricorn season. But I think because we have so much Capricorn, Saturnian energy, kind of rigid energy at the end of December, the new moon is on December 30th. I think it's so important as taking a psychological point of view or a depth psychological point of view is to balance the energy out. Like everything always has its opposite, and Capricorn's opposite is Cancer. So a little more of the emotional space, like having self-compassion, engaging with our emotional life. Cancer's ruled by the moon. So to have a balance of those things, like yes, you can have responsibility, be mature, create new goals, set new intentions, but to remember to also give yourself some care and some self-love in the process.
Beautiful. Yeah. Yeah.
So if I had some words, like just like themes, it would
Yeah.
be communication, responsibility, togetherness, and self-love
Hmm.
for December.
Okay. And letting go of what does not serve us.
Letting go. Yeah, letting go and coming together.
Amazing. How can people learn more if they're curious, if they want a little more personalized perspective? What's the best way to find you?
The best way to find me, you can find me on Instagram at the Stella Den, or you can go to stelladennet.com and you can email me.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for bringing a little different perspective to the holidays, the holiday season. And I love the balance idea. I think that that's always very important. And thank you for your time and your wisdom.
Yeah.
And we'll chat again soon.
Thanks for having me. Okay.
Of course.